There are always those who ask, what is it all about? For those who need to ask, for those who need points sharply made, who need to know where it's at. This. The mass of men serve the state thus, not as men mainly, but as machines with their bodies. They are the standing army and the militia, jailers, constables, posse comitatus, etc. In most cases there is no free exercise whatever of the judgment or of the moral sense, but they put themselves on a level with wood and earth and stones, and wooden men can perhaps be manufactured that will serve the purpose as well. Such command no more respect than men of straw or a lump of dirt. They have the same sort of worth only as horses and dogs, yet such as these even are commonly esteemed good citizens. Others, as most legislators, politicians, lawyers, ministers and office holders, serve the state chiefly with their heads, and as they rarely make any moral distinctions, they are as likely to serve the devil, without intending it, as God. A very few as heroes, patriots, martyrs, reformers in the great sense, and men, serve the state with their consciences also, and so necessarily resist it for the most part, and they are commonly treated as enemies by it. Henry David Thoreau, Civil Disobedience. That is the heart of it. Now, begin in the middle, and later learn the beginning. The end will take care of itself. But because it was the very world it was, the very world they had allowed it to become, for months his activities did not come to the alarmed attention of the ones who kept the machine functioning smoothly, the ones who poured the very best butter over the cams and mainsprings of the culture. Not until it had become obvious that somehow, some way, he had become a notoriety, a celebrity, perhaps even a hero for what officialdom inescapably tagged an emotionally disturbed section of the populace, did they turn it over to the tick-tock man and his legal machinery. But by then, because it was the very world it was, and they had no way to predict he would happen, possibly a strain of disease long defunct, now suddenly reborn in a system where immunity had been forgotten, had lapsed, he had been allowed to become too real. Now he had form and substance. He had become a personality, something they had filtered out of the system many decades before, but there it was, and there he was. A very definitely imposing personality. In certain circles, middle-class circles, it was thought disgusting, vulgar, ostentation, anarchistic, shameful. In others there was only sniggering, those stratas where thought is subjugated to form and ritual, niceties, proprieties, but down below, down below, where the people always needed their saints and sinners, their bread and circuses, their heroes and villains, he was considered a Bolivar, a Napoleon, a Robin Hood, a Dick Bong, ace of aces, a Jesus, a Jomo Kenyatta. And at the top, where, like socially attuned shipwreck Kellys, every tremor and vibration threatened to dislodge the wealthy, powerful and titled from their flagpoles, he was considered a menace, a heretic, a rebel, a disgrace, a peril. He was known down the line to the very heart-meat core, but the important reactions were high above and far below, at the very top, at the very bottom. So his file was turned over along with his time card and his cardio plate to the office of the tick-tock man. The tick-tock man, very much over 6 feet tall, often silent, a soft purring man when things went time-wise. The tick-tock man. Even in the cubicles of the hierarchy where fear was generated, seldom suffered, he was called the tick-tock man. But no one called him that to his mask. You don't call a man a hated name, not when that man behind his mask is capable of revoking the minutes, the hours, the days and nights, the years of your life. He was called the master timekeeper to his mask. It was safer that way. "This is what he is," said the TikTok man with genuine softness, "but not who he is. This time card I'm holding in my left hand has a name on it, but it is the name of what he is, not who he is. The cardio plate here in my right hand is also named, but not whom named, merely what named. Before I can exercise proper revocation, I have to know who this what is." To his staff, all the ferrets, all the loggers, all the finks, all the comics, even the minis, he said, "Who is this Harlequin?" He was not purring smoothly. Time-wise, it was a jangle. However, it was the longest speech they had ever heard him utter at one time. The staff, the ferrets, the loggers, the finks, the comics, but not the minis, who usually weren't around to know in any case. But even they scurried to find out. Who is the Harlequin? High above the third level of the city, he crouched on the humming aluminium frame platform of the airboat. Foof, airboat indeed. Swizzle kid is what it was, with a tow rack jerry-rigged. And he stared down at the neat Mondrian arrangement of the buildings. Somewhere nearby he could hear the metronomic left, right, left of the 2:47 p.m. shift entering the Timken roller bearing plant in their sneakers. A minute later, precisely, he heard the softer right, left, right of the 5 a.m. formation going home. An elfin grin spread across his tanned features and his dimples appeared for a moment. Then, scratching at his thatch of auburn hair, he shrugged within his motley as though girding himself for what came next, and threw the joystick forward, and bent into the wind as the airboat dropped. He skimmed over a slidewalk, purposely dropping a few feet to crease the tassels of the ladies of fashion, and, inserting thumbs in large ears, he stuck out his tongue, rolled his eyes, and went wugga wugga wugga. It was a minor diversion. One pedestrian skittered and tumbled, sending parcels every which way. Another wet herself. A third keeled slantwise, and the walk was stopped automatically by the servitors till she could be resuscitated. It was a minor diversion. Then he swelled away on a vagrant breeze, and was gone. Hi-ho! As he rounded the cornice of the Time Motion Study building, he saw the shift just boarding the slidewalk. With practiced motion and an absolute conservation of movement, they sidestepped up onto the slow strip and, in a chorus line reminiscent of Busby Berkeley films of the antediluvian 1930s, advanced across the strips, ostrich walking till they were lined up on the express strip. Once more, in anticipation, the elfin grin spread, and there was a tooth missing back there on the left side. He dipped, skimmed and swooped over them, and then, scrunching about on the airboat, he released the holding pins that fastened shut the ends of the homemade pouring troughs that kept his cargo from dumping prematurely. And as he pulled the trough pins, the airboat slid over the factory workers, and $150,000 worth of jelly beans cascaded down on the express strip. Jelly beans! Millions and billions of purples and yellows and greens and licorice and grape and raspberry and mint and round and smooth and crunchy outside and soft mealy inside and sugary and bouncing, jouncing, tumbling, clittering, clattering, skittering, fell on the heads and shoulders and hard hats and carapaces of the Timken workers, tinkling on the slidewalk and bouncing away and rolling about underfoot and filling the sky on their way down with all the colours of joy and childhood and holidays, coming down in a steady rain, a solid wash, a torrent of colour and sweetness out of the sky from above, and entering a universe of sanity and metronomic order with quite mad cuckoo newness. Jelly beans! The shift workers howled and laughed and were pelted and broke ranks, and the jelly beans managed to work their way into the mechanism of the slidewalks, after which there was a hideous scraping, as the sand of 1,000,000 fingernails rasped down 250,000 blackboards, followed by coughing and a sputtering, and then the slidewalks all stopped. And everyone was dumped, this away and that away, in a jackstraw tumble, still laughing and popping little jelly bean eggs of childish colour into their mouths. It was a holiday and a jollity, an absolute insanity, a giggle, but the shift was delayed 7 minutes. They did not get home for 7 minutes. The master schedule was thrown off by 7 minutes. Quotas were delayed by inoperative slidewalks for 7 minutes. He had tapped the first domino in the line, and one after another, like chick chick chick, the others had fallen. The system had been 7 minutes worth of disrupted. It was a tiny matter, one hardly worthy of note, but in a society where the single driving force was order and unity and equality and promptness and clock-like precision and attention to the clock, reverence of the gods of the passage of time, it was a disaster of major importance. So, he was ordered to appear before the TikTok man. It was broadcast across every channel of the communications web. He was ordered to be there at 7, damn it, on time, and they waited, and they waited, but he didn't show up until almost 10:30, at which time he merely sang a little song about moonlight in a place no one had ever heard of called Vermont, and vanished again. But they had all been waiting since 7, and it wreaked hell with their schedules, so the question remained, who is the Harlequin? But the unasked question, more important of the two, was, how did we get into this position where a laughing, irresponsible japer of Jabberwocky and jive could disrupt our entire economic and cultural life with $150,000 worth of jelly beans? Jelly, for God's sake, beans. This is madness. Where did he get the money to buy $150,000 worth of jelly beans? They knew it would have cost that much because they had a team of situation analysts pulled off another assignment and rushed to the slidewalk scene to sweep up and count the candies and produce findings which disrupted their schedules and threw their entire branch at least a day behind. Jelly beans. Jelly beans. Now, wait a second accounted for. No one has manufactured jelly beans for over 100 years. Where did he get the jelly beans? That is another good question. More than likely it will never be answered to your complete satisfaction, but then, how many questions ever are? The middle you know. Here is the beginning. How it starts. A desk pad, day for day, and turn each day. 9. Open the mail. 9:45. Appointment with Planning Commission Board. 10:30. Discuss installation progress charts with JL. 11:45. Pray for rain. 12. Lunch. And so it goes. I'm sorry, Miss Grant, but the time for interviews was set at 2:30 and it's almost 5 now. I'm sorry you're late, but those are the rules. You'll have to wait till next year to submit application for this college again. And so it goes. The 1010 stops at Cresthaven, Galesville, Tonawanda Junction, Selby and Farnhurst, but not at Indiana City, Lucasville and Colton except on Sunday. The 1035 Express stops at Galesville, Selby and Indiana City except on Sundays and holidays, at which time it stops at. And so it goes. I couldn't wait, Fred. I had to be at Pierre Cartain's by 3, and you said you'd meet me under the clock in the terminal at 2:45. And you weren't there, so I had to go on. You're always late, Fred. If you'd been there, we could have sewed it up together, but as it was, well, I took the order alone. And so it goes. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Atterley, in reference to your son Gerald's constant tardiness, I'm afraid we will have to suspend him from school unless some more reliable method can be instituted guaranteeing he will arrive at his classes on time. Granted, he's an exemplary student and his marks are high, his constant flouting of the schedules of the school makes it impractical to maintain him in a system where the other children seem capable of getting where they're supposed to be on time. And so it goes. You cannot vote unless you appear at 8:45 AM. I don't care if the script is good, I need it Thursday. Checkout time is 2 PM. You got here late, the job's taken, sorry. Your salary has been docked for 20 minutes time lost. God, what time is it? I've got to run. And so it goes, and so it goes, and so it goes, and so it goes, goes, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. And one day, we no longer let time serve us, we serve time, and we are slaves of the schedule, worshippers of the sun's passing, bound into a life predicated on restrictions, because the system will not function if we don't keep the schedule tight. Until it becomes more than a minor inconvenience to be late, it becomes a sin, then a crime punishable by this. Effective 15th July 2389, midnight. The office of the Master Timekeeper will require all citizens to submit their time cards and cardio plates for processing in accordance with Statute 555-7-SGH-999, governing the revocation of time per capita. All cardio plates will be keyed to the individual holder, and what they had done was devise a method of curtailing the amount of life a person could have. If he was 10 minutes late, he lost 10 minutes of his life. An hour was proportionately worth more revocation. If someone was consistently tardy, he might find himself on a Sunday night receiving a communique from the Master Timekeeper that his time had run out, and he would be turned off at high noon on Monday. Please straighten your affairs, sir, madam, or bisex. And so, by this simple scientific expedient, utilising a scientific process held dearly secret by the TikTok man's office, the system was maintained. It was the only expedient thing to do. It was, after all, patriotic. The schedules had to be met. After all, there was a war on, but wasn't there always? Now that is really disgusting, the Harlequin said when Pretty Alice showed him the wanted poster. Disgusting and highly improbable. After all, this isn't the day of the desperado. A wanted poster? You know, Pretty Alice noted, you speak with a great deal of inflection. I am sorry, said the Harlequin humbly. No need to be sorry. You're always saying I'm sorry. You have such massive guilt, Everett. It's really very sad. I'm sorry, he said again, then pursed his lips so the dimples appeared momentarily. He hadn't wanted to say that at all. I have to go out again. I have to do something. Pretty Alice slammed her coffee bulb down on the counter. Oh, for God's sake, Everett, can't you stay home just one night? Must you always be out in that ghastly clown suit running around annoying people? He stopped and clasped the jester's hat to his auburn thatch with a tiny tinkling of bells. He rose, rinsed out his coffee bulb at the spray, and put it into the dryer for a moment. I have to go. She didn't answer. The fax box was purring, and she pulled a sheet out, read it, threw it towards him on the counter. It's about you, of course. You're ridiculous. He read it quickly. It said the TikTok man was trying to locate him. He didn't care. He was going out to be late again. At the door, dredging for an exit line, he hurled back petulantly, Well, you speak with inflection too. Pretty Alice rolled her pretty eyes heavenward. You're ridiculous. The Harlequin stalked out, slamming the door, which sighed shut softly and locked itself. There was a gentle knock, and Pretty Alice got up with an exhalation of exasperated breath and opened the door. He stood there. I'll be back about 10:30, okay? She pulled a rueful face. Why do you tell me that? Why? You know you'll be late. You know it. You're always late, so why do you tell me these dumb things? She closed the door. On the other side, the Harlequin nodded to himself. She's right. She's always right. I'll be late. I'm always late. Why do I tell her these dumb things? He shrugged again and went off to be late once more. He had fired off the firecracker rockets that said, I will attend the 115th Annual International Medical Association invocation at 8 p.m. precisely. I do hope you'll be able to join me. The words had burned in the sky, and of course the authorities were there, laying in wait for him. They assumed, naturally, that he would be late. He arrived 20 minutes early, while they were setting up the spiderwebs to trap and hold him. Blowing a large bullhorn, he frightened and unnerved them so, their own moisturized encirclement webs sucked closer, and they were hauled up, kicking and shrieking high above the amphitheatre's floor. The Harlequin laughed and apologised profusely. The physicians, gathered in solemn conclave, roared with laughter and accepted the Harlequin's apologies with exaggerated bowing and posturing, and a merry time was had by all, who thought the Harlequin was a regular foofaror in fancy pants. All, that is, but the authorities, who had been sent out by the office of the TikTok man. They hung there like so much dockside cargo hauled up above the floor of the amphitheatre in a most unseemly fashion. In another part of the same city where the Harlequin carried on his activities, totally unrelated in every way to what concerns us here, save that it illustrates the TikTok man's power and import, a man named Marshal Delahanty received his turn-off notice from the TikTok man's office. His wife received a notification from the grey-suited Mrmee, who delivered it with the traditional look of sorrow plastered hideously across his face. She knew what it was, even without unsealing it. It was a billet doux of immediate recognition to everyone these days. She gasped and held it as though it were a glass slide tinged with botulism, and prayed it was not for her. Let it be for Marsh, she thought brutally, realistically, or one of the kids. But not for me. Please, dear God, not for me. And then she opened it, and it was for Marsh. And she was at one and the same time horrified and relieved. The next trooper in the line had caught the bullet. "Marshal!" she screamed. "Marshal, termination! Marshal! Oh my God, Marshal! What'll we do? What'll we do? Marshal! Oh my God, Marshal!" And in their home that night was the sound of tearing paper and fear, and the stink of madness went up the flue, and there was nothing, absolutely nothing they could do about it. But Marshal Delahanty tried to run, and early the next day, when turn-off time came, he was deep in the Canadian forest 200 miles away, and the office of the TikTok man blanked his cardio plate, and Marshal Delahanty keeled over running, and his heart stopped, and the blood dried up on its way to his brain, and he was dead, that's all. One light went out on the sector map in the office of the master timekeeper, while notification was entered for fax reproduction, and Georgette Delahanty's name was entered on the dole rolls till she could remarry. Which is the end of the footnote and all the point that needs to be made, except don't laugh, because that is what would happen to the Harlequin if ever the TikTok man found out his real name. It isn't funny. The shopping level of the city was thronged with the Thursday colours of the buyers, women in canary yellow chitons and men in pseudo-Tyrolean outfits that were jade and leather and fit very tightly, save for the balloon pants. When the Harlequin appeared on the still being constructed shell of the new efficiency shopping centre, his bullhorn to his elfishly laughing lips, everyone pointed and stared, and he berated them. "Why let them order you about? Why let them tell you to hurry and scurry like ants or maggots? Take your time, saunter a while, enjoy the sunshine, enjoy the breeze, let life carry you at your own pace. Don't be slaves of time, it's a hell of a way to die, slowly by degrees. Down with the TikTok man." Who's the nut? Most of the shoppers wanted to know. Who's the nut? Oh well, I'm going to be late, I gotta run. And the construction gang on the shopping centre received an urgent order from the office of the master timekeeper that the dangerous criminal known as the Harlequin was atop their spire, and their aid was urgently needed in apprehending him. The work crew said no, they would lose time on their construction schedule, but the TikTok man managed to pull the proper threads of governmental webbing, and they were told to cease work and catch that nitwit up there on the spire, up there with the bullhorn. So a dozen and more burly workers began climbing into their construction platforms, releasing the agrav plates, and rising towards the Harlequin. After the debacle, in which, through the Harlequin's attention to personal safety, no one was seriously injured, the workers tried to reassemble and assault him again. But it was too late. He had vanished. It had attracted quite a crowd, however, and the shopping cycle was thrown off by hours, simply hours. The purchasing needs of the system were therefore falling behind, and so measures were taken to accelerate the cycle for the rest of the day. But it got bogged down and speeded up, and they sold too many float valves and not nearly enough wegglers, which meant that the Popley ratio was off, which made it necessary to rush cases and cases of spoiling Smasho to stores that usually needed a case only every 3 or 4 hours. The shipments were bollocksed, the transshipments were misrouted, and in the end, even the Swizzle Skid Industries felt in. "Don't come back till you have him," the TikTok man said very quietly, very sincerely, extremely dangerously. They used dogs, they used probes, they used cardioplate cross-offs, they used teepers, they used bribery, they used stick-tights, they used intimidation, they used torment, they used torture, they used finks, they used cops, they used search and seizure, they used Falaroon, they used betterment incentive, they used fingerprints, they used the Bertillon system, they used cunning, they used guile, they used treachery, they used Ral Mitgong, but he didn't help much, they used applied physics, they used techniques of criminology, and what the hell, they caught him. After all, his name was Everett C. Mrmee, and he wasn't much to begin with, except a man who had no sense of time. "Repent, Harlequin," said the TikTok man. "Get stuffed," the Harlequin replied, sneering. "You've been late a total of 63 years, 5 months, 3 weeks, 2 days, 12 hours, 41 minutes, 59 seconds, 0.03611 microseconds. You've used up everything you can and more. I'm going to turn you off." "Scare someone else. I'd rather be dead than live in a dumb world with bogeymen like you." "It's my job." "You're full of it. You're a tyrant. You have no right to order people around and kill them if they show up late. You can't adjust. You can't fit in. Unstrap me and I'll fit my fist in your mouth. You're a nonconformist. That didn't used to be a felony. It is now. Live in the world around you. I hate it. It's a terrible world. Not everyone thinks so. Most people enjoy order. I don't, and most of the people I know don't. That's not true. How do you think we caught you?" "I'm not interested." "A girl named Pretty Alice told us who you were." "That's a lie." "It's true. You unnerve her. She wants to belong. She wants to conform. I'm going to turn you off." "Then do it already and stop arguing with me." "I'm not going to turn you off. You're an idiot." "Repent, Harlequin," said the TikTok man. "Get stuffed." So they sent him to Coventry, and in Coventry they worked him over. It was just like what they did to Winston Smith in 1984, which was a book none of them knew about, but the techniques are really quite ancient, and so they did it to Everett C. Mrmee, and one day, quite a long time later, the Harlequin appeared on the communications web, appearing elfin and dimpled and bright-eyed and not at all brainwashed, and he said he'd been wrong, and it was a very good thing indeed to belong, to be right on time, hip-ho and away we go, and everyone stared up at him on the public screens that covered an entire city block, and they said to themselves, "Well, you see, he was just a nut after all, and if that's the way the system is run, then let's do it that way, because it doesn't pay to fight City Hall, or in this case, the TikTok man." So, Everett C. Mrmee was destroyed, which was a loss, because of what Thoreau said earlier, but you can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs, and in every revolution a few die who shouldn't, but they have to, because that's the way it happens, and if you make only a little change, then it seems to be worthwhile. Or, to make the point lucidly, excuse me sir, I don't know how to tell you this, but you were 3 minutes late? The schedule is a little bit, off? He grins sheepishly. "That's ridiculous," murmured the TikTok man behind his mask. "Check your watch." And then he went into his office, going Mrmee, 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 Mrmee.